Let's read and understand few quotes from at least Mac Flecknoe. And what was it? The first work, Mac Flecknoe. The first, of course, Absalom and Achitophel. But I thought of sharing something about Mac Flecknoe. He's a fictional satiric figure. He's not a real figure in the sense the man who existed or a contemporary of John Dryden. But remember, it is also an examiner's favorite questions because I have found some questions around this name Mac Flecknoe, whether it is a reference to any real character or a person or a contemporary of John Dryden. Though Mac Flecknoe is a fictional character, he actually represents another character or a person, a minor poet of his time called Richard Mac Flecknoe. For some strange reason, Dryden, never liked him. Maybe he didn't, approach Dryden for corrections, a proofreading of his poetry like other his contemporaries did, because Dryden always enjoyed the state of being guardian of all, the young poets of that, time. So always they sought some advice from him since he was a kind of, guardian figure. So he was a minor poet who is in fact seen as Mac Flecknoe here. He portrays him as a as the king of dullness in this poem, and Flecknoe ceremonially, I mean, in this particular poem, crowns Thomas Shadwell, another contemporary. In fact, he existed. He was a popular satirist, and remember when things were reversed. I mean, Dryden lost his or fell off from the favor of the parliament. Thomas Shadwell became the poet laureate. So Thomas Shadwell is in fact being attacked in this poem, Mac Flecknoe. That is also a noteworthy question. In fact, they might ask you who is being criticized or who is being directly attacked by John Dryden in his Mac Flecknoe, or who is Mac Flecknoe, something like that. So for Mac Flecknoe, you can say Richard Mac Flecknoe, and usually this Thomas Shadwell's question we would appear. They would ask you to identify from the list of four who's been criticized or attacked in this Mac Flecknoe. That is Thomas Shadwell, because he was very critical of Dryden's intelligence and never approved or accepted his authority as a great satirist. So, in this poem, Mr. Thomas Shadwell is projected as the son, symbolic son and successor to Richard Flecknoe. That is some background about Mac Flecknoe. And Thomas Shadwell, as I told you, is a restoration dramatist. So there was some open, hostility, as I told you, existed between these two, John Dryden and Thomas Shadwell. So that was his background. Later, he was championed, he championed Ben Jonson's realism. And he was also a very popular poet and became a poet laureate later. So talking about the first work, Absalom and Achitophel, it revolves around exclusion crisis. So this can also be a net favorite. What was the poem of Absalom and Achitophel talking about and revolves around something like that. So this was famously called exclusion crisis, or they might straight away ask you what was exclusion crisis. So it was a political conflict over whether James, Duke of York, a Catholic and brother of Charles II, should be excluded from English throne. There was this debate among parliamentarians. So fearing absolutism and Catholic rule, Whigs, a political party, actually supported exclusion. Tories defended hereditary succession. So that is why there was this conflict. Question can be like, who opposed the exclusion of Charles James of Duke of York? Something like that. Or who defended? You can expect such questions. That is why, since John Dryden was a witness to all these developments, he writes this Absalom and Achitophel to criticize or ridicule that party politics and kind of satire on ambition and rebellion. So the next work of John Dryden, Essay on of Dramatic Poesy, is also a critical dialogue. And this is again a very popular one from the point of view of NET examination. here it's in the form of a dialogue, conversational tone. The poem is written in a conversational tone. I mean, in the sense, not the poem, it's a prose work, I'm sorry. So it laid out, as I told you, the foundation for writing, literary work or poetry or drama. So what ensued between these four poets was a result of this, an essay of dramatic poesy. In fact, came in the form of essay of dramatic poesy. So among the four characters, Dryden is identified with one, Neander. That I'll show you in the next slide. So that is the question actually. Who is Dryden among these four of essay and dramatic, dramatic poesy? That could be the question. Or who does John Dryden represent among these, four speakers? So the talk is about English drama and criticizing against classical and French models. It actually debated about ancients versus modern rules versus freedom. And there is also, this is another important thing. They defends, I mean, John Dryden in fact defends Shakespeare's vitality. So important aspect of this conversation or essay is Dryden also defines Shakespeare's vitality over rigid classical correctness, which means Shakespeare never wished to follow those classical unities of Aristotle, except for two, three plays of him, including Tempest. So he, in fact, justifies because vitality is important than the rigid rules, and that is a comparative study of Shakespeare and his plays. And these were the four characters I was talking about in Dryden's essay of dramatic poesy. So that there is a debate conducted through four speakers, so each representing a different, distinct critical position. So the first one, any question can be asked. Identify one of the speakers involved in this discussion or debate of Dryden's essay of dramatic poesy. They might give one of these names and the three names from somewhere. I mean, three different names. So then you may have to remember all these four. So any one can figure in that list. Or they might ask you who is actually Dryden among these four. That is Neander, I told you already. So Critic defends ancient, or the question would be who defends ancient Greek and Roman dramatists among the four. So in that sense, many possibilities around this particular aspect or this particular work of John Dryden. So while Critic defends the ancients, Eugenius supports moderns, and Lycidius praises French drama, and Neander speaks for English drama. And he is widely accepted as Dryden's own voice. So that is the thing to remember. So Dryden uses the heroic couplet like sword. In fact, Mm, uh, if we have to analyze the features of Dryden's satire, he uses biblical allegories. So this allegories is where some vices or virtues are being treated or brought into the story or poetry like characters. And the best example I've given many times that the pageantry or even that seven deadly sins from Dr. Faustus can be an example for biblical or allegory. In fact, biblical allegory, of course, seven deadly sins was straight from Bible. So classical heroism, he attacks that classical heroism because while comparing an ordinary man with trivial accomplishments of him, elevating that to the state of heroics. So he is ridiculing uh, through that exaggerated comparison or praise. So there'll be razor sharp couplets, favorite quote if you can say, all human things are subject to decay. So right from, I mean, it is from Mac Flecknoe. This sounds similar to what Buddha, Lord Buddha says. Perhaps I quoted this, all the things which are composed must be decomposed, or all the things which are created must be destroyed, or will come to nothing someday, something like that. So, similar to that, Dryden says all the human things are subject to decay, which means nothing, stays permanent, or everything is subject to decay or, destruction, ephemerality of human glory. So Dryden pioneers this mock heroic tone. So he is the one who begins or uses this particular, a style of uh, writing, or the vein of speaking, certain satirical things, mock heroic. So he's the one who started it. That is why he can be called a pioneer of mock heroic tone.